In the case of Anthony Bennett, I mean, look, man, you talking about a bust? It doesn't get much worse than that.
Anthony Bennett, the number one pick of the 2013 NBA draft, and one of the biggest draft busts of all time. This man only lasted 4 years in the NBA, playing for 4 different teams, but somehow has managed to get a non-guaranteed contract from the Houston Rockets after a 3-year absence from the league. He's not even a guarantee to make the roster though, and before we look at his potential comeback to the league, let's rewind back to that 2013 draft and try to figure out, how did this man go number 1 overall, and how were the scouts so wrong about this guy? If you are a newer fan to the NBA,
I am not fucking baby,
or happen to be living under a rock in 2013, then you may not have heard of Anthony Bennett. He was the number 1 pick in the NBA draft that year, which surprised a lot of people, including Bennett himself. He is considered one of the biggest draft busts of all time, especially as a number 1 pick. He never even really came remotely close to living up to his expectation, but now, in basic terms, his invite to the Houston Rockets training camp, he's intriguing a lot of NBA fans who have not forgotten how much of a letdown this guy really was. But before we get into his outlook for possibly joining the Rockets, let's rewind all the way back, even further, to his days at UNLV and the year leading up to his number 1 selection in the NBA draft. Anthony Bennett is originally from Canada, but ended up moving during high school and playing basketball at Findlay Prep, one of the best high school basketball teams in the United States. He was an amazing player in high school and was ranked number 7 in the entire country in his high school class, according to ESPN rankings. He decided to commit to UNLV, which was not too far from Findlay Prep, both being in Nevada. After arriving at UNLV, it was very clear that he was going to be the face of the team. In his 1 year on the team, he averaged 16 points and 8 rebounds a game while shooting 53% from the field and 37% on his threes. He led the Runnin' Rebels to a 25-10 record and a trip to the NCAA tournament, where they did end up losing in the second round. During his 1 year in college, it was clear he was among the best in all of college basketball. He had a lot of athletic finishes and hard dunks to go along with his great touch and long shooting range ability. His position was listed as a power forward, but he had the power and length of strength to bang down low as a 4, and the shooting ability with enough handles and driving capability to play the 3. He had all the tools on offense and was really impossible to guard, especially when his 3-point shot was hitting at a high rate. He was just bigger, better, stronger, and more skilled than his opponents, and had the NBA written all over him. So, leading up to the 2013 NBA draft, there was no question Bennett was on most NBA teams' radars. Most of the things being said about Bennett by scouts and writers were really encouraging for his draft stock, such as, if you put Bennett in a 1v1 tournament, he would beat everyone in his draft class pretty easily, or he's going to be a primary scoring option at the next level, and my personal favorite, he scored more frequently than Blake Griffin did in college, and that's on a UNLV team without a real great guard to distribute the ball. He is a less athletic version of Blake Griffin with a better jumper. Hearing stuff like this about an NBA prospect sounds like he's on the path to stardom, right? Well, he had the athleticism to translate to the next level, and many scouts thought that he had the highest ceiling in the draft. When the lottery results came in and showed the Cavs were getting the number 1 pick, they were extremely excited and now had the luxury to be able to decide on who they wanted out of any player in the draft class. Only problem was, this year, there was no clear-cut guaranteed number 1 pick in the draft. When the Cavs had the number 1 pick the last time, it was pretty easy for them to decide on Kyrie Irving, but they did not have that same feel about this draft. This year's draft class seemed to be more geared towards players that fit the team instead of drafting a guy to build the team around. The Cavs were obviously struggling since the departure of LeBron James and were trying to build back into a playoff team. The Cavs had reportedly considered about 6 different players for that number 1 pick. Nerlens Noel, Alex Len, Otto Porter, Ben McLemore, Victor Oladipo, and Anthony Bennett. Noel, Len, and Bennett couldn't do pre-draft workouts due to injuries. Oladipo and Porter were viewed with low ceilings or having limited potential. McLemore's draft stock sunk a bit when he decided to show up to the workouts overweight and unprepared. But the Cavs still showed some decent interest in him, although they knew he wasn't on the same level as their last first pick in Kyrie. It was a tough spot, and it's almost like there was no player really worth a number 1 overall pick, if that makes sense. The Cavs knew all these guys had flaws, but ultimately knew they were going to have to make a choice. The flaw in Bennett was that his defense was noticeably bad, but a lot of scouts overlooked this because he was so young and it would come with time and work itself out with better conditioning and Bennett getting into better shape. Also, he was a bit undersized, being listed at about 6'8", but his long wingspan and shooting ability made up for that. The Cavs saw a high ceiling in Bennett and a lot of potential, and reportedly didn't make their final decision until right before it was time to draft. Taking Bennett number 1 overall shocked a lot of people across the league, including fans, and even Bennett himself. He was quoted saying that he didn't even know he was going number 1 until the moment they called his name. Although this pick shocked a lot of people, his performance shocked everyone even more. Anthony Bennett started off his amazing NBA career by showing up to camp overweight and out of shape. It's definitely not a good look when your number 1 draft pick is wheezing running up and down the floor in a scrimmage. It became clear very early that Bennett's work ethic was a huge problem. He dominated whatever level of ball he played at his entire life, and now, for the first time, being bigger, more skilled, and more talented wasn't going to be enough to make him the best in the NBA. He was going to have to work for it, and it seemed he just didn't want it. At times, it seemed like he just didn't really care and was just going through the motions. The NBA has some of the best trainers in the world, and this man couldn't even manage to really get in shape at all during his time in the NBA. After showing up clearly out of shape, he impressed even more when he went out and missed his first 16 field goal attempts of his career, until his 5th game to score a bucket from somewhere besides the free throw line. On top of that, his most impressive game his entire rookie season was a 16-point preseason performance where he scored 14 in the 4th quarter. This man couldn't even get minutes on a court over Tristan Thompson and Anderson Varejao. Bro, Tristan Thompson is more reliable in a relationship than Bennett was at getting minutes his rookie year.
That's tough.
He wrapped up his quality rookie campaign with whopping averages of 4 points and 3 rebounds a game, shooting 35% from the field, on top of only averaging about 13 minutes per game and only playing in 52. And for those of you wondering, no, he did not win Rookie of the Year. He spent the next 3 years on 3 different teams, never averaging more than 5 points a game, and finally, the NBA realized they didn't want him, and he was forced to go overseas in order to continue his basketball career. So, after taking a look at this man Anthony Bennett's professional basketball resume, we look back and try to solve, how were the Cavs and most NBA scouts so wrong about this guy? Well, it's not so clear cut. I mean, obviously, he was not expected to be out of a job in the NBA after 4 years. Any team that scouted him could tell you that. When it comes to quote-unquote draft bust, I feel like obviously pretty much everyone was wrong about these guys, because to be considered a bust, you had to have had very high expectations. But what was missed? Is there anything that stood out that could have been a red flag with Anthony Bennett? I mean, yeah, he was a little undersized height-wise, and yeah, his defense was pretty suspect, but I mean, to never even really crack a dent in the league as a number 1 pick, those 2 flaws should not have meant that. Well, there is one man in the Cavs organization that was pretty hesitant to pick Bennett with the 1st overall pick, and that's Chris Grant, the former GM. Before the draft, Cavs had a front office meeting and took a vote on who they should select. It was a 9-1 vote in favor of Bennett, with that one vote being from Grant. He was not sold at all on Bennett's work ethic and conditioning, and after not seeing him in the pre-draft workouts, he wasn't a fan of that either. Grant was supposedly the one man in the Cavs front office who wasn't high on Bennett. Grant was much higher on Ben McLemore and even tried to trade the Kings for their 7th pick to get him, but the Kings ended up backing out once they realized that McLemore was going to fall to them at that spot. The worst part about it is that the former GM Grant took the blame and the fall for screwing up and picking Bennett. Ultimately, Grant was fired that following February, and it's hard to think taking Bennett at number 1 didn't have anything to do with that. Now, obviously Grant is not the only one that saw flaws in Bennett, but he is the only one in the Cavs front office who voted against selecting him. But in reality, NBA scouts and front offices can't always get it right, and there will be busts in the NBA for years to come, and probably forever. Now, I just want to make it very clear that I am not an Anthony Bennett hater by any means, and I really hope he does figure it out. So let's look at some positives for this guy. On the brighter side for Bennett, it looks like maybe his early exit from the NBA was a wake-up call. After briefly playing overseas, he eventually started playing in the D-League, or what is now called the G League, basically the NBA minor league. He has made huge improvements and has pretty quickly become one of the best players in the league, averaging 12.2 points, 5.7 rebounds, and 1 steal per game, shooting just about 48% from the field. His biggest improvement is his 3-point shooting, which is around 42% the past couple seasons and a remarkable 45% last year. He has shot the ball very well, and that could be the key in him possibly making a comeback to the NBA. Now, I know the competition he's playing against isn't nearly as tough as the NBA's, but it seems that Bennett is showing some signs that he really does want back in the league. Maybe he finally realized that he's gonna have to actually work really hard, and his talent alone won't cut it in the NBA without a terrific work ethic. Maybe he got the motivation he needed being out of the league for the couple years that he was gone. Now, before everyone gets too excited about Bennett's NBA comeback for the Houston Rockets, let's get one thing cleared up. His contract is non-guaranteed, which means the Rockets can basically cut him at any time with no penalty. So essentially, this is a tryout and basically just an invite to training camp. They could still let him go if they don't like what they see, and he might not even be on the roster for the Rockets come game 1 of the regular season. But me, I like this move by the Rockets a lot. I mean, they have a ton of money going into their starting lineup, and this is a low-risk contract by all means. This is Bennett's true test at a possible road to redemption, and if he does end up making the team, there's a few ways I think the Rockets could really use him. The Rockets love shooting threes, bottom line. It's funny, but it's very true. The Rockets like layups or a dunk or a three-pointer, and that's it. Now, the guards on the Rockets have been hoisting up threes a lot, but the big men really haven't been. Capella is not a shooter at all, and Tucker is more of a corner spot-up shooter. They need a pick and pop guy, and a guy like they used to have in Ryan Anderson to really stretch the floor. Westbrook is not a shooter, although he thinks he is sometimes. And if your bigs are just in the lane or running the pick and roll and always rolling, the lane's going to be extremely clogged and really limit Harden and Westbrook's driving ability. Rockets could really use a big guy that can pick and pop and spot up from 3 to spread the floor for Harden and Westbrook to work. Although some people think the Rockets' potential signing of Bennett is useless, I think that if Bennett can shoot threes in the NBA like he has been in the G League, he can be pretty useful for a really cheap price. People forget the man is only 26 years old, and who knows what his future and potential could be coming back to the NBA with a little more seasoning. He was a number 1 draft pick for a reason, and he has the intangibles to succeed. We're just gonna have to wait and see if he gets that chance. Bottom line is that Anthony Bennett was the number 1 draft pick due to his natural skills and ability, along with the weak draft class. Combine that with the fact of his questionable work ethic being overlooked, and it's not hard to tell why he's the number one pick. And fast forwarding to 2019, he has the chance to maybe change his legacy, or at least try and start a new chapter and prove the NBA wrong when they all gave up on him. Where does Anthony Bennett rank in your list of the biggest NBA draft busts of all time? And what do you think his chances are of making his NBA return this year for the Rockets? Let me know what you guys think, and until next time, peace.